Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. Hey, this week we're going to talk about the Concept brand from Pacific Stereo. All right, well, let's talk about the brand Concept. Now, Concept is something called an in-house brand or a private label, whichever way you want to talk about it. And what that is a brand that's created by the store. I'm sorry I'm a little hoarse. I have a bit of a cold going on. So Concept is, if you're familiar with the brands, JCPenney had their own brand called MCS, Modular Component Systems. And that was their in-house brand, and they set it out to have other manufacturers build those products for them, and they would be more profitable for the store. So there was a company out in the West Coast called Pacific Stereo. Now, Pacific Stereo was originally in the 50s, 60s timeframe an electronics parts supplier. But somewhere along the way, they changed their name and started selling stereo gear. But then about the same time, CBS bought them. And that was either late 60s or early 70s. I couldn't quite get confirmation. But it was at that point that they started to really expand and grow locations. So they had most of their footprint out in California. I think they had over 50 stores, and they were in Texas and other places. So they sold all sorts of brands, not just their own, but they sold Pioneer and Sony and Hitachi and Marantz. They sold every other product as well, but they also wanted to sell their own brands. So they came out with some of their own lines. Concept was one of them. And they were a very well-regarded brand. Now, they had another line called Quadraflex, which I think mostly were speakers, and they actually manufactured those themselves in a small shop in California. But the Concept line was manufactured, it's kind of debatable, was that Tandy or was it Foster Electronics? Couldn't quite get the confirmation of that. Regardless, they were able to get these manufactured, and they're just a well-regarded series of receivers. Now, they had multiple models from, I think, a 2 or 3 all the way up to the 16.5, which was the largest at 165 watts, I think. This happens to be the 11.0, and it is 110 watts. But they were a somewhat no-frills gear receivers, but they had fantastic specs, and the build quality of them was, very good. And they were highly regarded. Now, if you've run across these, just know that it's a good all-around receiver. May not have, some of the cachet some other brands may have, but they're just a solidly built unit. What they do have as far as functionality are the basics and what you need to set them up and, really get them going. So I'm going to give you some close-ups of this, only of the front. This unit needs a little bit of, conditioning issues on the back side. So I'm going to show you the front. It has a rather soft, I'll say, faceplate, so they were somewhat, easily scratched and things. But again, they had, for this line, the Concept line, they had receivers, but they also had a very nice turntable, which I have one of those, and a cassette deck. And I'm not sure if they had anything else in the line, but if anyone has any catalogs or things, I'd love to, get that information. But anyway, this is the Concept, and we're going to take a quick up-close shot, and then we're going to talk about some of the specs. right, well, I've tallied up sort of the point system that I use, and so I thought I'd walk you through that now. If it's the first time you've seen one of my videos, I give points for specific features and some of the specs, and then that way I can compare them to other reviews I've done over time and give you an idea of where things rank. The reason for this is so that you can determine if there's a feature that you like or want something that's highly featured with different functions versus something that has lesser functions but more power. You can do that. So starting off with some basics here, these were manufactured in 1977. I could not find the MSRP though. I normally like to try to capture that, but for some reason I just couldn't locate any of the MSRPs. If anyone has that, would love to know what they cost back in 1977. And for the other models as well. If you happen to have another model, I'd love to know that for future reference. So when I start things off with is the power side of things. This is rated at 110 watts. And so anything over 100 watts gets 20 points. And so for that, that's in that 800 to 199 watt range. It also has, which is not a surprise because I mentioned they have great specs, it can handle a 4 ohm load. So for that, it gets an additional 30-point bonus. On to phonos, only has one phono. And that's what I mentioned before. It doesn't have a lot of features, but has everything that's necessary. So it's just one phono and it's MM only. There's no MC functionality. So for that, it got 10 points. On to additional inputs, gets 10 for each additional input. And it only offers 2 monitor inputs for cassette or tape. So that's all it has, just 2 additional. So it gets 20 for that. Then it has all the other controls that you'd pretty much expect. Has the balance control, 5 points for that. Has a variable loudness, so it gets 5 more points. Has tone defeat switch, which not always so common, but they did add that here, and that's the 10 points. Now, tone controls has a lot of variability there. It doesn't have a dedicated mid-range, but there are 2 controls for each, which go, it crosses the band of the bass and the treble a bit to sort of cover that. So for that reason, I gave it points for the bass, the mid, and the treble. Has a filter switch as well. And then power meters. It's a dual function power meter. So they have both functions for tuning, but also for power. But I did give it points for that. So it got 20 points. And then pre-out, amp in. You have the ability to separate those and use them separately, or add an EQ, etc. Those sorts of things. It has a wood looking case. It doesn't have a real wood veneer case. I don't know if the highest model, the 16.5, actually had a real wood case. I tend to think it was a vinyl covered like this one, but for that reason I did not give it the points for that. On to AC connections, has 1 switched and 3 unswitched, so 10 and 15 points each. And number of speakers that it can connect and run, it can handle 3 sets. So it did maximize that. You've got a lot of flexibility there. Set up lots of speakers and try them out, or move them all over the house, however much speaker wire you wanted to, run. So all totaled, came up to 220 points. And that's pretty respectable. As I mentioned before, the concept was not intended to blow the doors off at its number of features. It was meant to be a well-rounded, receiver that was highly regarded or well built, I'll say. And I think they very much accomplished that. If you read pretty much anyone that has had one of these, I think most everyone only has glowing remarks about them. They were, since Foster Electronics was Pacific Stereo was so focused on a stereo, my assumption is a bit, I've never seen a store, I've never met anybody that worked there, but because they had such a focus on the stereo, I tend to think that they just knew what they were doing. They knew the market, and so therefore they knew what they wanted in a spec for their private label items. And the turntable, which I've not actually used yet, I've had it for a few months, but it looks very well done. It looks like it's got some great features on it, and it looks well built. And I suspect, all of the other models that they came out with would have been very similar. Never seen the cassette deck, but I would expect pretty much the same for that as well. If you have any of these, please reach out. Would love to know your experience. Mainly specifically the 16.52. That's considered a go-to for anyone that collects the monster receivers and things like that. But love to know your other models. The 12D I think is another model. The 2, the 3, all of them would be very interesting to hear your feedback on them. And the cassette. I don't think I've run across any comments around anyone's experience with the cassette deck either. I think that's going to be it. It's a short video this week. I'm a little hoarse, you can probably tell. So like the video, please hit thumbs up. Want to see those future videos, hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you guys for tuning in.